It was what the Uzbeks and the CIA wanted us to believe, in effect. It wasn't actually the truth. And when I started saying that, London got very tetchy indeed. I got called back to a meeting in March, at which I was rather carpeted, and I was told that London's view was it was perfectly legal for us to use intelligence obtained under torture. But they said that as long as we didn't do the torturing ourselves, there was nothing in international law to say that we couldn't get material from torture. That astonished me, because that's not actually the view of any independent international lawyers. And I was told that Jack Straw himself had made the decision that we should obtain torture material. And in fact, I understand that only last week Jack Straw has in fact confirmed that now to members of the House of Commons, that he has decided we should obtain torture material. I mean, I'm still horrified and astonished by this, but what annoyed London most of all was when I kept saying, look, this material's just not true. It's all an exaggeration. It's exaggerating the links of Hizb ut-Tahrir, the IMU, Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, the Uzbek opposition parties. It's trying to make out that any opposition to Karimov and any religious Uzbeks are Al-Qaeda. And that's simply not true. But that wasn't what London wanted to hear. After that time in March, that meeting in March, I was kind of increasingly isolated, and I was more or less sort of sent to Coventry. I kept sending reports back to London, but I wasn't getting anything back. Then in August 2003, I suddenly was confronted by the Foreign Office with these incredible allegations. They said I was an alcoholic. They said I was offering visas in exchange for sex. They said I was stealing money from a post account. I mean, really, every nasty slur you could throw at someone. And at the same time, these allegations were leaked to the media, so they're basically just trying to destroy my good name and undermine my credibility. And that was obviously, quite astonishing, an incredible thing to happen to someone. And I couldn't really believe it was happening. And I did at that stage suffer a nervous breakdown, in effect, because I'd never expected to have my good name attacked in that way. And really my relationship with the Foreign Office never recovered. In the end, they had to drop those allegations because there wasn't a shred of evidence for any of them. I mean, just completely untrue. And at the time they presented me the allegations, they said I had 1 week in which to resign, or the allegations would become public. I refused to resign, which they didn't expect. I decided to stay and fight it out. And then, of course, they had to try and prove the allegations, and they couldn't because they were completely untrue. So I went back to Uzbekistan in January 2004 and carried on as ambassador for a while. But eventually they got rid of me. They sacked me in effect.
I read in one of your interviews that you conveyed it also to the British ambassadors in other posts in Europe. What response did you get from them?
Privately, I had quite a lot of support from other ambassadors. I had a lot of sort of emails and letters and notes of support. But there wasn't anyone else prepared to stick their neck out as far as I was, if you see what I mean. People were willing to say in private, yeah, what you're saying is absolutely right. We think it's appalling, it's dreadful. I'm glad someone's standing up. But in terms of, if you like, going public, or even within the office, sort of admitting to supporting what I was saying, I think most other people were rather too career-oriented to do that.
How do you view the war on terror?
I mean, no one can doubt that what happened on September 11th was a dreadful thing. But I do think we've got to keep it in perspective. And I've got no doubt at all that the security services are extremely happy to exaggerate the threat, We've got stupid policemen running around saying there are 200 active terrorists out there trying to blow us all up. Well, it's simply not true. And much of that is based on this kind of intelligence I was seeing in Uzbekistan. If I'd been in Saudi Arabia or Egypt, I would have been seeing similar material from there. Again, exaggerating Al-Qaeda, exaggerating Osama bin Laden. And I think it's worth saying often that no one on the UK mainland has ever been killed by an Islamic terrorist. You know, there has been no Islamic terrorism on the UK mainland that's killed anyone. I remember in the 1970s, I actually personally was twice knocked over by the blast from IRA attacks in London, and lost all the windows of my office on one occasion. And then we didn't have all this madness about locking people up without trial and confining them to house arrest and all that sort of stuff. And that was a much more real threat. And I don't think there's any reason to suppose that if Tony Blair hadn't been stupid enough to follow George Bush into attacking Iraq, we would have been a target at all. You know, it seems to me that politicians have got an interest in talking up the threat, making everyone feel scared, and in doing so, effectively criminalising the Muslim community in the UK in order to increase their own power. And the security services have got an interest in feeding the politicians with intelligence material that exaggerates the threat, because that increases not only the powers but also the budgets of the security services. So I'm not saying there is no threat. Obviously there's some threat. Terrorism is a terrible thing. But an awful lot of it is hard sell and exaggeration. I mean, you think of when they were sending tanks to Heathrow Airport, and if someone was trying to hijack a plane or put a bomb on a plane, what use would a tank be? Seriously, how do you stop a man getting on a plane using a tank? It was complete public relations hype. And I think that's what an awful lot of this war on terror is. I think people should be profoundly sceptical, both of the politicians and of the police and the intelligence services.
Can you please describe to me the general economic situation in Uzbekistan from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, the economic situation is pretty terrible. The biggest part of the economy is still agriculture. 60% of the population live in small villages on state farms. All farming land is still owned by the state. There's no real private farming. The state has invented something it calls private farming. It's kind of fig leaf, where there's a small number of private farms, but those people are told by the state farm what to grow, where to grow, how much to grow, who they can sell it to, and how much they'll get for it. So it's not private farming as we understand it. Cotton is the main crop, and again, entirely state-grown, monopoly purchasing by state trading companies. The workers on the farms get 2,000 some a month. That's $2 a month salary, and often that's paid late or whatever. They also get a very, very small plot of land. We're talking maybe 20 square meters on which to grow vegetables for their family and themselves, which is how they largely live. It's kind of very low level of peasant subsistence. And the state trading company, of course, makes huge amounts of profit because it's paying for cotton at about 3% of the market price. It's paying at 3% of the price next door in Kazakhstan, where it's been privatised. Then it's selling on to the world market at the full market price. And all the production figures and the amount sold, it's all the state secrets. There's plenty of room for corruption. And the labourers on the farm are the sort of peasants, are basically slaves. I mean, they're serfs because they're bonded to the farm. They still not only have exit visas, there's still exit visas in Uzbekistan to stop the population from leaving, and they have internal movement visas. So you're not